Folks, it is Friday, but it is not time for bold predictions. We have Ohio State media availability, but it is not a Talkin' Tuesday. There's an open practice, so it feels like it must be August. Basically, I have no idea when it is in this holiday season, but it is a football Friday on the Podcast Daily. Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham are here with me, Austin Ward. And Bill, we are going to hear from the Ohio State defense today, and I think the moral of the story is they're pretty good.
They are good. Yeah, is that the end of the show? Ohio State's defense is good. We'll talk to you guys later. This does feel like, though, I'll be interested to hear, I guess, how much Jim Knowles will put on this game. But it does feel like everything they've done since the first Oregon game has been to get back to this point and put a much better defensive performance on the field against Oregon. I think with a reasonable assumption that if Ohio State wanted to achieve its goals this year, it was going to have to play the Ducks again sometime. And here they are getting ready to play them in the Rose Bowl. And it's not like a referendum on Jim Knowles' ability as a defensive coordinator. I think we have enough body of work to know that he's a very good defensive coordinator. But this does feel like a moment for him, for this defense to, I think, not show us what's happened over the last 2 months has been real, because I think it has been real, but to make a pretty emphatic statement about just how good this defense, which we pondered, could this be one of the all-time Ohio State defenses coming into the season? And at times it's definitely looked that part, and other times it hasn't. This is a real opportunity here to, I think, leave no doubt, as Ryan Day says, that this is one of those defenses.
Yeah, but it's also because it's really the only second time this year where Ohio State's played an offense that is worth being kind of worried about. Even the Tennessee offense, I think, was mostly smoke and mirrors, and most people could recognize that. And the last time they played a good offense was Oregon, and Oregon did pretty much whatever they wanted to them. So it's clear this is a really good defense, as far as college football and just the landscape of the sport. But if it wants to be remembered in the elite defenses, the 2021 Georgia defense, the 2019 Ohio State defense, last year's Michigan defense, then you have to show up in a game that matters, and you have to show up in a game that matters against a team that has really, really explosive and very real offensive weapons. And this is the first test Ohio State's had since Oregon. As we mentioned on Thursday's show, they haven't given up a passing touchdown since that game. And they played 3 top 10 teams, and none of those top 10 teams really felt like a threat to throw the ball. So this is, by its very just shape of it, extremely different than anything else they've faced all year other than Oregon. And so that Jim Knowles has to have something different, right? Because you can't come into this doing the same thing.
Well, I think everything we've seen in the second half of the season has been different than what we saw when they were out there in Eugene, which, needed to be. I mean, I think that's what's wild about all the talk about a rematch or revenge, is that we have already spent 2 full months detailing all the ways that Jim Knowles has tried to revamp the defense or streamline the calls or add twists in games or different blitz packages. And even when it comes to handling tempo, we just did that, getting ready for Ohio State and Tennessee. You'd think that there would be way more ground to cover with Jim Knowles, and there are going to be 4 defensive players that join him at the podium. We're expecting JT Tuimoloau, Ty Hamilton, Jordan Hancock, and Cody Simon to speak later on Friday as well. But I'm struggling, Bill, to think of new ground to cover, because we've spent every waking moment really in the last 2 months when we've talked about the defense, putting in contrast what they've done since Oregon and how Oregon was the impetus for all the change.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't mind if people are willing to do it, I guess, revisiting some of the discussion after the Oregon game and just how what Ohio State's defense is now, I guess, kind of meshes with what they were hoping to get to coming out of that game. And the changes are apparent, right? It's just, I think the simplest shorthand is Jim Knowles is kind of back to running the defense that got him this job in the first place, short of playing the jack position. But in terms of structure and defensive line assignments and all that kind of stuff, this is what made him successful, and why I think Ryan Day, pinpointed him as the guy who was going to take this thing over. But is there anything? I know he's not going to divulge secrets, but is there anything they've not gotten to that he would want to get to? I'm sure there are Oregon specific things that came out of those conversations that obviously we wouldn't have seen because they haven't played Oregon. yet. But I don't know. I don't know if they would say like, yes, this is 100% everything we've wanted to do, everything we thought we could be coming out of those meetings and tough talks after the Oregon game, or if even given how well they've played, they still think there's another level for them to get to.
Yeah. That's why I'm not trying to be negative, I swear. I'm just like, I don't know that even if they did nothing different, it really would have mattered over the last 7 games they played, because the teams that they played weren't offensively threatening enough to make you have to really even do anything crazy to adjust. So like, I think I'm feeling a touch skeptical, just because in the Jim Knowles era so far, we've seen the ability to really dominate against average offenses. And then when they've played good offenses, the Buckeyes have looked quite pedestrian on defense. And so I think that it is I'm definitely kind of from Missouri on this one, I guess, is where I'm at. Like, I know Ohio State has the ability to get there and the ability to do it and the ability to affect the Ducks offense in a way that they didn't in October. But that all starts up front. And I think that there is some solidarity / cohesion / whatever other word you want to use for the offensive line, or sorry, the defensive line and the rest of the defense now. I think that has certainly improved. But other than that, I don't know that I can see something tangible that would have even mattered against the offenses that they played in the last 7 weeks. Am I completely being negative?
I can't believe I'm going to say this. It must be a Freaky Friday after all. But that James Franklin, Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen offense, as limited as they are with the actual receivers on the outside, which is maybe the most valid point here, how did they finish? 35 points in that game against Oregon. Like, they are not a complete pushover offense, and doing that on the road in a game where they had very little margin for error, holding them without a touchdown at all really is a pretty feather in your cap style performance. Yeah. I don't think that one should be discounted.
I don't want to suggest that they're not a good offense against most defenses, but they line up very well offensively with what Ohio State does well defensively. And so, like, we're in this wait and see mode, because the one area that has felt like a weakness that Oregon exposed in October has not been tested since. And I think that it's hard to say like it's fixed, because the one area, which is, can you cover people down the field, has not been challenged since that game. And I don't, I can see where there would be optimism that it's been corrected, just simply because the pass rush seems versatile and multiple and doing different things and running stunts and doing different games up front. But I also wonder, like, and Austin, you brought this up a handful of times in the last 2 weeks as we were preparing for Tennessee. Like, would the defensive backs be able to hold up down the field? And in that game, they certainly were. But now you have to prove it again against Oregon.
I think I think I'm more on Team Austin here. Sorry, Brim. I think you raised.
I realize I'm coming across to touch like critical, but I don't want to. I'm just trying to say, like, I don't know that we've seen enough to know that it's really changed.
I don't disagree with that offhand. I guess the one thing that I would say that gives me a little more confidence is that we've at least seen them put the plans into place that we thought they needed to take steps forward as a defense. And you're 100% right if you don't believe that those have all really been tested to the max like they're going to be against Oregon. Of course that's true. I think they've been sort of like incrementally tested with some of the different opponents that Ohio State has had to play in their particular styles. Like, I had concerns about the ability to cover Indiana, but it didn't matter because Ohio State just got after the quarterback in that game. And Oregon's offensive line is better than Indiana's, but with some of the creativity we've seen with the pressure packages, and then with the way that Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and Tyleik Williams played against Tennessee, like, how could you not feel at least somewhat confident in their ability to go out and do it against Oregon, even though it is a much more difficult challenge. And like, I actually think, Penn State's offense, while limited, is pretty good, to Austin's point. Like, Penn State has scored 16 touchdowns in its last 3 games, scored 37 against Oregon, 38 against Southern Methodist, although there were a couple of defensive scores in there, 33 against USC. Like, it is an
they're
offense,
really good. But
yeah,
do you worry that James Franklin has an Ohio State block the way that Ryan Day
Yeah,
has
of course
Michigan block?
of course he does, but I still think like they went out there on the road and really controlled that game and dominated
Yeah.
that offense for the almost the entirety of 4 quarters, and it's an offense that at times has shown itself to have a decent amount of quality to it. It's not the same thing as Oregon's. It's not. I'm not trying to make the comparison. Nobody Ohio State has played this year has a Tej Johnson other than Oregon, obviously, who has the Tej Johnson, and like Evan Stewart against Ohio State played out of his mind. He has not been that way all year. It was kind of an outlier performance from him, frankly, against Ohio State. So there's that part of it too. Like I'm not sitting here, a couple days out from the game saying like Ohio State's got this. This is easy. They're in a much better spot because Oregon's offense is very good. But I don't feel like I don't know anything about them either. If that makes sense. Like I actually do feel like we have a pretty firm grasp on who they are defensively, and it'll come down to some key matchups, just like it did the last time. But I think they'll have a much better plan going into this one than they did last time.
I want to be clear. I don't think Ohio State is going into this game without any clue how to stop Oregon. I think obviously playing them before gives you some confidence that, hey, we've seen where tweaks need to be made or where a matchup here or a different concept here can change things. So, but I'm just saying from a big picture perspective, I don't know that we've seen Ohio State be tested in a way that would entirely remove any like worry that someone who never worries, would have. That's all.
I think that there are parts of what you guys both said that have to be, are very valid for this game and looking ahead to what's going to happen on Wednesday. Burnham, when you say, maybe not a complete test or at least do it in a playoff setting, like this will be different than the first matchup, but also Penn State, when I even mentioned this 5 seconds ago in the show, like their receivers were not going to be capable of providing that true test for Davison Igbinosun and Denzel Burke, and they didn't. Maybe Indiana's could, but in that game, the pass rush neutralized that. You saw maybe a high caliber quarterback who was slicing through everybody else throughout the course of the year, and Curtis Rourke, he had no, like we talked about the back shoulder throws, and those were really non-existent against Ohio State. I guess I'm saying you're taking bits and pieces of all of the best teams Ohio State has played, Penn State, Indiana recently, all the talk that we spent, breaking down tempo and the different ways that Jim Knowles was preparing for Tennessee and unique shifts and different personnel groupings and moving the wide receivers out beyond the hashes. Like Oregon can do all of those things. So I do agree with you. This is the ultimate test, the ultimate barometer. They're undefeated. They're number one in the country. They won the Big Ten and they beat Ohio State already. So you're absolutely right about that, partner. But like, I don't think that we just throw out the last 7 weeks as not having any meaning if they don't, shut down Oregon on Wednesday night in the Rose Bowl.
Oh, I'm not saying they're going to, I'm not saying they have to shut them down. I'm just saying you just have to score one more point than they do. And I think, as we start to move toward Wednesday and the game, like I'm of the mindset that you're looking at a mid-30 scoring game for each team again, and probably a field goal difference between them. So like, I don't think that you have to do miles better than you did last time, as long as you're not giving up chunk plays the way that Ohio State did in the Oregon game, because that's what ultimately cost them the game, not having a pass rush, which meant you couldn't cover guys for 7-8 seconds at a time. So like the fix is relatively simple. I think it's just put pressure on Dylan Gabriel. But now the question is, what does Dan Lanning and the Ducks do different to know what Ohio State's doing different? So it's a fun little cat and mouse. I just love it. And I'm super not even nervous at all.
This guy loves cats and mice.
I can tell that the vibes are immaculate for you. I do like, Bill, the fact that Ty Hamilton and JT Tuimoloau are among the players included, because dating back to Oregon and really dating back to training camp, we've spent very little time talking to any Ohio State defensive lineman other than Jack Sawyer. Mm-hmm. And I think because of what happened in that game against Oregon the first time around and how much scrutiny, I think this played into it. I don't think that Ohio State or the position coach or anybody else wanted to dive into details. If they just wanted to keep their nose to the grindstone and fix it and not talk about it publicly, or they didn't appreciate the way that they were being talked about, so be it. I understand that. And they're all, they're all being well paid to make those decisions, and they're all grown-ups. And I think we can understand why, but they are mandated to speak during the college football playoff. And so we're maybe going to get some answers that I think are valuable about what this process has been like to address the pass rush and the complete lack of pressure that occurred 2 months ago.
Yeah, I always I don't feel bad, but I certainly understand why it would be annoying to answer questions about something that was in early October at this point. But it's like we've just really never had a chance to really dissect it with anybody who was involved in the process other than Jim Knowles. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity from JT, from Ty, from more defensive linemen will be available when we're actually in Los Angeles. Assistant coaches will be available when we're in Los Angeles. I don't know that I expect all that to be particularly illuminating conversation about what happened, but the offensive line, or excuse me, the defensive line is very clearly being asked to do some different stuff than what it was doing the first 6 games of the season. And I think is much better off for it. I know like there were some early games where the sack production was nice, but they were also playing overmatched opponents. Lately it's not been even, I wouldn't say that, but it's Big Ten competition at the very least. And you just see, I don't even know the purpose behind the change of the defensive line at times that hasn't even always been, in my opinion, like designed to get the defensive line more TFLs and more sacks. It's just about getting pressure on the quarterback no matter who gets it. And there's something, at times there's almost like a sacrificial element to that for the defensive lineman at times, which I imagine maybe isn't always super fun to play in. But if the end result is your defense is getting off the field, the crowd's getting into the game, and you're just smothering the opponent, then I'd imagine that helps make up for it. But it is a different reality, it feels like, for the defensive line compared to what they were doing the first half of the season, what some of these guys have been asked to do for much of their careers. So yeah, Joe, whoever wants to shine some light on that, I'd greatly appreciate it because it is a rather fascinating dynamic.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like it hasn't been designed just to free up Jack and JT to get sacks after sack after sack. It's like it's just been designed to change the look that the quarterback sees, I think, because you've watched Ohio State on film for a decade and it looks exactly the same over and over. And so it's pretty easy at times to pick that apart, especially if you have a high quality quarterback who started 364 college games.
Is that the updated tally?
I believe that's how many games Dylan Gabriel started in college football. Yes.
But, and it goes back to this conversation we're having about it being, 7 games removed from Oregon. Like the group that absolutely dominated in the trenches against Tennessee looked nothing like the one that we saw against Oregon. Like other than the jersey numbers being the same, like everything else was wildly different. And I think
but part of that's because Oregon's offensive line is the best Ohio State's played all year and will continue to be the best they've played all year. So like these guys have to take that as a personal challenge, I think, in some way. And if I was them, and I'm certainly not, but if I was in their shoes, I would be offended pretty much at the way I was talked about after that Oregon game, because they got embarrassed, but they also weren't put in a position to really try and win one-on-one battles in that game. And so now you have an opportunity to correct the record. And I think that that's really important for these guys individually, especially guys like Jack and JT and Tyleek and Ty, who are, imagine where we're at with Jack and JT. Those are guys who are probably getting 3rd-day grades right now in the NFL draft, maybe late 2nd-day grades. Like this is a money game for those guys. And so when you have the opportunity to match up against one like NFL offensive line, and like they did earlier this year, and then you are basically sidelined by your coaching staff and the game plan, like that has to be incredibly frustrating. So I think that they take it personally.
I think this is the best offensive line in the country they're getting ready to face. I think it's like either Oregon or Texas, and Texas just lost a couple of offensive line starters in its game against Clemson. And I think Army won the Joe Moore Award, but Texas and Oregon, I think, were the other 2 finalists for it.
Yeah, Colin Simmons won Freshman of the Year. I mean,
no, I know, and that's not the end all be all. I know believe me, I've had some issues with other offensive lines that have won the Joe Moore Award in the past, LSU. But I this is a very good offensive line. The tackles are both NFL players. I think the center's an NFL player. At least one of the guards is going to play in the NFL. Like I'm just trying to reinforce your point there, Berm. Like there is a measure of pride here for a defensive line that the reputation of Ohio State's defensive line outside of Columbus is always very interesting to me when I talk to other people who cover other college football teams. Like they think that this is can be like an otherworldly, overwhelming defensive line. And at times it does feel like that. It definitely looked like that against Tennessee. But I don't know that Ohio State fans would always say that this group has looked like that. Maybe it's come up, short of those very lofty expectations at times. But they're going to need it against this offensive line, because we know what it looks like when Dylan Gabriel is comfortable and unbothered. And if that is the same thing that happens in the Rose Bowl, then I don't think Ohio State's going to win the game.
I mean, I don't even think that the Rushmen themselves would have agreed with that assessment from outside the program, because Jack and JT, that we mentioned that earlier this week, like they said, this had never happened in 4 years where they were producing at the level they were at the same time. Like that's what they've been building for. It certainly can be otherworldly, because that's what they were against Tennessee. They were utterly dominant. And if they do that again against Oregon or anybody else after that, like Ohio State's going to win those games and they're going to win a national championship. But we'll talk more about that after this message from our friends at Future Fans. Hey, all, sorry for the interruption, and even more sorry, as always, that Liberty is not with me to talk about Future Fans on a Friday. She'll be back for bold predictions on Tuesday, and she was so excited in the Ohio State-Tennessee playoff game to get that Jeremiah Smith touchdown right. Got a text from my wife, said she's not a Future fan anymore. She is a true fan, a loyal fan. I'm not making that up. That really happened, and it's all because we've had Future Fans football to learn from and experience together. And we're making some memories that are lasting throughout this whole season and as long as the postseason is ongoing. If you want to join in like we have, you can still use that code Buckeye through January 1. We might even be able to talk them into using it longer, as long as Ohio State stays alive in the college football playoff, getting ready for Oregon next Wednesday. We'll have bold predictions. Liberty will be back. She has been so engaged, and we're just learning a ton from this. It's an interactive experience. If you haven't seen it, you got to check them out. futurefans.com/OSU. That's futurefans.com/OSU, and use our code Buckeye to get 10% off. It is awesome. I promise you won't regret it. Back to the show. All right. So there's, Bill, an open practice, 15 minutes. It's beautiful. We love every opportunity to do that. But I don't feel like there's as much intrigue as there was before the Tennessee game. Like, not everyone's just going to be huddled around the offensive line looking to see who's lined up where. What are we going to do?
Good. Maybe that means I can watch the offensive line in peace then, because usually that's the case at practice. It's usually just me over there hanging out watching the offensive line, and everyone was over there last time. I don't know. I wonder if they'll show us more than one snap this time. I honestly don't know. Like in that sort of window, what is even kind of remotely intriguing when it comes to what we might be able to see. I don't know. See if Jeremiah Smith's still good. I bet he is. So,
that's could go either way. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll probably be indoors, so that'll be a difference from the last time, because it's supposed to rain on Friday afternoon, right? So,
I don't know, Berm. I don't check the weather every hour like you.
How do you live without checking? I mean, don't you go outdoors, man?
Yeah,
you have to see what's happening out there.
I'm gonna wear shorts and a quarter zip no matter what. Doesn't matter.
All right. Well, it's supposed to rain Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Okay, so just get used to that. It's going to be a rainy weekend, and of course, it's raining on Sunday when we fly to California, because Lord knows I can't get a dry flight with just clear skies, huh? Unbelievable. But
is it raining inside the plane?
You have to fly through the clouds, and that's where the rain is. Everyone knows that.
Do you get wet?
On the inside? Yes.
You better hope not.
On the inside?
That's true, because I'll be on the same plane.
That's where the tears are.
Guess I'll prepare accordingly.
I'm going to be watching ankles, because I'm curious about Josh Fryer's ankle. And I'm curious about Donovan Jackson's ankle, which was heavily taped up for the Tennessee game. And quite frankly, that's about it. I want to see the health of the Ohio State offensive line.
Austin Sarabelt,
because Austin Sarabelt as well. So you got to get a sense of maybe how that rotation will change, if at all, heading into next week. And other than that, there's not a lot of question marks Ohio State has. We're not going to see anything other than stretching. And as soon as they go to punt, they're going to tell us to leave. So I'm not going to spend too much time saying what we're going to watch at practice, because we're going to see nothing. But it's going to be nice to be there.
Hey, we saw something in the 15 minutes last time.
We made a meal out of that one snap.
I know, but we talked about that one snap for 18 minutes on Snap Judgments afterwards, and we were dead wrong about what it meant. So was it worth it?
We were
Luke
kind of
Montgomery
right.
didn't start. The entire premise was that Luke Montgomery was going to be starting at left guard.
No.
And-
We learned that Tegra Shabola was probably still going to start at right guard, and he did.
All right. Well, we got half right.
Yeah, that's credit. And Luke Montgomery played 31 snaps. I think that's close. I think we deserve 2/3 marks on that. That's a victory.
Oh,
I think we should get to watch punt this time too. See if
See if
Ohio
Nick
State-
McClarty's ready.
I don't know. They got to do something, right? I mean, the special teams situation is just. I don't know how long I can keep watching this. It's bleak.
This is a situation. It's similar to you not looking at the weather. You can just stop paying attention to it and then just let it.
That won't
happen
help.
to you.
That will not help because
Well.
it's damaging to Ohio State and their national title opportunities. Like,
The weather is also damaging to Ohio State.
I think it's going to be pretty nice in the Rose Bowl. That's my prediction.
looks
What's
like
the forecast that on Wednesday? You have that for us?
76.
Whoo! All right.
Is that nice?
Sounds good
Not
to me.
bad. Have you,
All
Bill?
right.
Have you covered a Rose Bowl yet? You covered the 2018 one, right?
I cover the Washington one. Yeah.
The Washington one.
Mm-hmm.
So that we leave on
Good
Sunday,
experience.
as was mentioned by Berm. We have media availability today. So we will have the press conference stream up with Jim Knowles and those 4 Buckeyes. That's a defensive media day. We will have open practice and maybe some observations from that later on Friday night. Saturday, offensive media day. Not sure. Can't remember who all was on that list. You got it, Bill? Chip Kelly, Will Howard,
Chip Kelly, Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith was on there.
Quinshawn Judkins,
Um,
and Emeka Ibuka, I believe.
What's that? That's Chip Kelly, Emeka Ibuka, Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Jeremiah Smith. You were
Yeah, got to it. And so we'll put that up on the podcast YouTube channel as well if you would like to watch, as I'm sure you will. But there will be no podcast daily on Saturday because we're not changing that part of the routine up. But we'll have snap judgments and everything else as we go through the weekend here, getting ready for Ohio State and Oregon in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. This, though, it's been a Football Friday on the podcast daily with Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later.